Should you save? Should you save money, save for retirement, uh, save for different things? Should you have a balance in your account, or should you just give it all away? The reason why that's important for us to ask is in dealing with money management as Christians, we have certain obligations, and one of those obligations is to do what the Bible tells us to do. And so the Bible makes some statements that make saving a little challenging to know if I should do that. You think of the statement that Jesus made to that rich young ruler, sell all you have and give to the poor. So you have things in there as well as being charitable, and we should be charitable, which we'll get to giving down the road. But should I save? Jesus said, probably one of the more oft quoted verses in opposition to saving is Jesus said in Matthew 6 verse 19, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. The last half of that was in verse 20. So don't lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven. Certainly sounds like Jesus is saying don't save. Don't lay up for yourself a balance in a savings account or an investment fund somewhere. It certainly sounds like Jesus might be saying that. The problem is that contradicts a number of other statements in Scripture, some of which is Matthew 6 through 8, speaking of observing the ant that saves a stash in the summer in order to have in the winter, certainly teaching us the need to save in some way. You have Proverbs 13:22 that says that a good person leaves an inheritance to their children, which would require saving. And there's other statements as well, but there is statements to the contrary of the idea of saving. So is the Bible contradicting itself? The Bible doesn't contradict itself, so the Bible can't be saying don't save and save. So then is there something different with the saving verses or something different with the don't save verse? Well, let's take the don't save verse. Again, Jesus said, do not lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. But in verse 20, he says the word but lay up for yourselves treasure, or do not, I always get that backwards when I'm quoting it. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. But in verse 20, he uses the word but, lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. He's doing a compare and contrast. If you have to choose, if you're stuck choosing saving material possessions or finances, money, versus doing what God has called you to do, then choose to do what God has called you to do. But that's if you are forced to make a choice. It's why when Jesus continues in verse 24, no one can serve two masters. Note that word. Note the word serve and note the word master. For either he will hate the one or love the other, or he will be devoted to the one. Note that word. So serve, masters, devoted to the one, and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Serve is mentioned twice, devoted to once, and master once. What Jesus is actually saying is you cannot let anybody call the shots in your life except for Jesus. And so if you're forced to make a choice between two things, Jesus and anything else, then you should choose Jesus. Now that doesn't mean you can't have anything else. Jesus isn't saying you can't have money or saying you can't save. He's saying if in order to save, you have to disobey Jesus or not live the lifestyle that Jesus calls you to live, well then give up the money. Don't save the money. But if you can live a life submitted to Jesus Christ and save the money, then save the money. So you have to read what Jesus' intentions are here. So we can save, we just can't be conflicted in our loyalty. So if we can save, then that leads me to something that we need to consider. 2 Thessalonians 3:10, another responsibility we have is, Paul says there, if someone is not willing to work, then do not let them eat. There is this expectation in Scripture, while we're supposed to be charitable, so if I see someone else in need, I'm supposed to do everything I can to help them out. If I'm truly in need, it's okay to receive help. That's why the church became a source of benevolence. what the government does for us today in America, typically the church did for people in the first century. You would take care of the poor. But yourself, you would always do everything you can to make sure that you were taking care of yourself so that you did not become a burden to somebody else. Now, what people don't realize is people are often short-sighted in that today, many of us live long lives. We know it's not guaranteed, but many people live up into their 70s, 80s, even 90s. Some even live beyond the age of 100. And often when you get that old, and even sometimes before those ages, you begin to at least have a limited capacity to work. So you can't work as much, or you can only work certain types of jobs, and that really restricts your ability to acquire an income. And you know that is ahead. Sometimes we get to a place where we can't work at all. And we know that these things are ahead of us. And a responsible person who is seeking to take care of themselves, not so that they have what they want, but so that they have what they need, and they don't depend on somebody else to give them the resources that they've worked hard to earn so that I can have something. Instead, I need to do everything I can to make sure that I'm independent financially. And part of that is making sure you're prepared for a retirement life. Now, this is not making sure you can retire at the age of 50 and enjoy life, even though you're fully capable of working. That's not what this is. Not that you can't do that, but that's not really under the umbrella of being responsible. So we want to make sure we have enough to live on when we retire. Sometimes we rely entirely on Social Security. Some people are in a position where they can decline Social Security. I would heavily encourage someone to not do that, because you are turning down a financial resource that you'll be kicking yourself down the road if you don't have. If you don't work a job at all, you're a stay-at-home mom, I would encourage you at some point when the season is right, pick up a job so that you are paying into Social Security, even if it's just to do that, so that you have some source of an income when you retire. Because if you don't work at all, oftentimes, especially if you never did, you won't have any Social Security. So call your Social Security Administration office and try to make sure you understand the ins and outs of what's happening. Check your statement online or whatever, and make sure you're aware of what's ahead of you so that you can be wise and plan and be financially independent. Again, not for your own gain, but so that you don't have to take from somebody else because you didn't take care of yourself. So the other end of Social Security, thinking it through, is typically Social Security is not enough really to live off of it. Actually, when it was first designed, it was meant to be supplemental income. It was also designed to be taken only when you were near the end. You know, people expected to live a few years on that, where now people are expecting to live like 30 years on it, at least 20, 15, somewhere in that range, but sometimes up to 30 or more years on Social Security. That's a lot of resources to take care of somebody, and Social Security wasn't designed to do that, and it doesn't really quite cut it. Now, if you're really a skimper, a penny pincher, you may be able to make ends meet. Now, it depends on how much you paid into it. So some people, because of their income, they paid a lot into Social Security, so they get a lot more back. And some people don't realize that not everybody gets the same exact amount. It depends on what you pay into it. It's why you need to check your statement. But it depends on what you pay into Social Security. And often the amount that Social Security pays you is not enough for you to live comfortably. It might be enough for you to get by barely. It's not enough for you to live comfortably. It's certainly not enough for you to live in a charitable way where you can give to others. So you're going to likely need to supplement that income. Now, you could do it working, but again, one of our concerns is at some point I'm going to be limited in my ability to work, and so I need to keep that into consideration. But you might be able to do that at least for a season. So that might be one way to supplement that income. Another way is to participate in retirement accounts. Purchase an IRA, 401k. Now, I'm not giving you purchasing advice without a professional. Go speak to your banker, speak to a financial investor, financial consultant, those kind of people, and tell them what you want to do, and they'll give you advice. And sometimes that advice can be free depending on the service. And then do some research online and buy into some investments so that you're setting aside money to be prepared so that you have an additional income on top of the Social Security so that it's not as tight financially. Another thing that you need to consider is sometimes we expect things to be a certain way when we get into retirement. I could probably live on less when I'm retired. And we think the reason why we think of that is the expenses we're going to get rid of. Like, I'm not going to be driving to work anymore, so I might not need as much gas or much of a car, or I might be able to do without a car. You can get the senior citizens discounts on things. My mortgage might be paid off by then. But what people don't often consider is the increased expenses. Probably the most common is medical care. When you get older, you tend to need more medical care than when you were younger. So your medical care expenses increase. Well, I know there's Medicare, Medicaid, all those different things. You really need to read between the lines and see if what's provided there is actually going to take care of things. And there's really no way of knowing what tomorrow holds. So there's a need to be prepared as best we can. So you have that likely expense. Many people, instead of living in their home, they end up moving into an apartment, downsizing, moving to an apartment. They have a rent payment instead of a mortgage payment. Instead of having nothing, they have a rent payment. Or property taxes increase during that time. And it's just all kinds of possibilities for expense. You have to move into a retirement community or even a retirement home. And there's in-home care and all that stuff, and expenses increase. So don't just think I'll be able to live on less of an income than I have now. It might be possible, but certainly there's a lot of hidden expenses that we often don't consider. Plus, consider your inflation cost. So when you're retired, you're thinking about retirement. Let's say you're my age. I'm in my early 40s, and I might work till I'm 70, so I have possibly near 30 years left before I would retire. So I need to think, if inflation goes up 3% each year, not say it would, but let's say it would go up 3% each year, there's a good chance that my expenses will be triple what they are now at the time of my retirement. So I can't just say I can retire off on this when it's probably going to cost me a lot more to live 30 years from now. Plus, if I live to 100, let's say I do live in my retirement for 30 years. Well, at the end of that retirement, it's going to be 3 times what it was at the start of retirement to live on. So these are things that you have to think through as far as expenses. Now, you can only do what you could do. So you're working as hard as you can, and you're saving, you're being budget conscious, and you're participating in retirement plans, you're doing everything you can. At the end of the day, you have what you have, and you trust God for the rest. But as long as you're actually doing everything God tells you to do, to exercise wisdom, to save, to manage your money well, and to be prepared and to attempt to be self-sufficient. There's a reason why charity is instructed in the New Testament, in the Bible in general, is because there are people that won't be able to attain it even if they're doing the right things, or just different devastations come into their life that make it to where they weren't able to get there. But nonetheless, do everything you can to get there, and part of it is thinking through Social Security and retirement. So if you haven't done so, if you're not already retired, I encourage you to contact your Social Security Administration, contact your bank, contact some investor, look at your money, think things through, a financial planner, think things through, and at least start. let's say maybe you're only able to save 10% of the amount you need to save to be able to retire adequately. Then do that. Do the 10%. Then don't just do nothing. Do whatever you can. So get some advice, do some research, and get ready. And I'm telling you, at the end of the day, you'll be better off for it. And again, it's not really just for you to be better off, but you won't have to take from others, whether it's your children, government. You won't have to take from others, at least not as much. It becomes a need to others. And so you're really, if your heart's right, you're doing it for others also. So if you would like any guidance on that, if you have any questions, or if you want to give me any feedback, just do all that in the comments. Just leave a comment for me. Be glad to respond to anything you have to say. If you think that anybody else would find this useful, please share it. Or if you like the content or would like other people to be aware of the content, the more you interact with this video and the channel, the more visible things will become to others. So again, share it with others, but do all the above. Don't just do one. Share this with somebody else. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button on YouTube, follow the page on Facebook, give us a like and a comment. Do all those things, and more people will become aware of what God's trying to say to us about our finances. God bless you.